Everything changed on a Thursday afternoon while I was helping my cousin Ryan replace a section of fence behind his house. We were taking a break, sitting in the shade with bottles of water, when he looked up from his phone and frowned. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." He turned the screen toward me. "Why aren't you in any of Claire's photos?" At first, I didn't understand the question. Then I looked closer. The account on his screen belonged to my wife. At least, it looked like my wife. Same smile, same face, same life, or at least a version of it. But it wasn't an account I had ever seen before. I took the phone from his hand. 300,000 followers, thousands of posts, professional photographs, travel photos, brand partnerships, comments from people all over the country, and not a single picture of me. Not one. I laughed awkwardly and said there had to be some mistake. Ryan shrugged. "I just assumed you knew about it." The uneasy feeling started right then. I opened Instagram on my own phone and searched for the account. Nothing appeared. I checked again. Still nothing. Ryan watched as the realization slowly spread across my face. "Try opening it from my phone again," I said. He did. The profile appeared instantly. That was the moment I understood what was happening. The account existed. It was active. It had existed for years. And my own wife had blocked me from seeing it. Not recently. Not by accident. Years ago. I stared at the screen while traffic moved past the neighborhood and a lawn mower hummed somewhere down the street. 17 years of marriage. 2 children. A house in Boise. And suddenly I was looking at proof that Claire had been living a life I knew absolutely nothing about. For the first time in a very long time, I felt like a stranger looking in through my own window. Before that afternoon, I would have told anyone that Claire and I had a solid marriage. Not perfect. No marriage survives 17 years without rough patches. But stable. Predictable. The kind of relationship people stop questioning because it appears to be working. We lived in Boise, raising 2 children who were old enough to need less supervision, but still young enough to fill the house with activity. Between school events, sports schedules, work obligations, and everyday responsibilities, life moved at a pace that rarely left much room for self-reflection. Claire worked in marketing. That single word explained a lot of things over the years. Travel, networking events, industry conferences, weekend seminars, client dinners, photo shoots. Every unusual schedule change seemed to fit naturally inside her profession. And because I trusted her, I never felt the need to investigate. I barely used Instagram myself. My account existed mostly so relatives could share family photos and vacation pictures. Social media simply wasn't important to me. Claire, on the other hand, always seemed more comfortable online. Looking back, there were moments that should have stood out. A girls' weekend that somehow produced dozens of professional-looking photographs. A conference in Denver that lasted 3 days longer than originally planned. A beach trip she described as a brand event, despite never mentioning the brand afterward. At the time, every explanation sounded reasonable. Life has a way of helping you ignore contradictions when you already believe the person telling the story. Whenever something felt slightly off, I found a logical answer before the question could fully form. That's what trust does. It fills gaps. It smooths edges. It turns missing pieces into assumptions. By the time Ryan showed me that Instagram account, I wasn't discovering a single secret. I was discovering that hundreds of small moments from the past might not mean what I thought they meant. And once that possibility entered my mind, it became impossible to ignore. That evening, after dinner, I sat alone in my home office and created a new Instagram account. It felt ridiculous. I was 43 years old, using a fake profile to look at my own wife's social media page. For a few minutes, I almost closed the browser. Then I opened Claire's account again. At first, I focused on the obvious things. The photographs were polished and professional. There were sponsorships, travel posts, restaurant reviews, lifestyle content, and smiling selfies from cities I vaguely remembered her visiting. The more I scrolled, the stranger it became. Entire years of her life had been documented online without me ever seeing them. Then I started reading the comments. Thousands of people interacted with her content, but one name appeared constantly. Derek. At first, his comments looked harmless. Great photo. Looks like an amazing trip. Proud of you. Normal social media interactions. But as I moved backward through older posts, the tone changed. Inside jokes appeared. References I didn't understand. Comments that seemed written by someone who expected a response. And he always got one. I spent hours scrolling through years of posts. The deeper I went, the more familiar dates began appearing. A conference in Seattle, a marketing event in Nashville, a networking retreat in Phoenix. Trips I remembered. Trips we had discussed around our kitchen table. Trips I had never questioned. Now I noticed something unsettling. Whenever Claire posted from those locations, Derek often appeared in the comments within minutes. Sometimes there were photographs taken from angles that suggested he was standing nearby. Nothing explicit, nothing undeniable, but enough to create a pattern. And once I saw the pattern, old memories began rearranging themselves. Suddenly, events from the past fit together differently. I wasn't accusing anyone. Not yet. But for the first time, I could no longer convince myself that everything I was seeing was innocent. Something was there. I just didn't know how much. If you've made it this far, this story clearly caught your attention. If you're enjoying it, drop a like on the video. It helps me see what kind of stories you want more of next. Let's keep going. The next morning, nothing about my routine changed. At least, nothing visible. I woke up at 6, made coffee, packed lunches for the kids, and sat at the kitchen table while Claire scrolled through her phone beside me. She looked exactly the same as she had the day before. The same smile, the same voice, the same casual conversation about errands, work deadlines, and weekend plans. If she noticed anything different about me, she didn't show it. I drove to work, answered emails, attended meetings, and spent most of the day reviewing project schedules. Outwardly, I was functioning normally. Internally, something had shifted. For years, whenever I encountered something that didn't make sense, my instinct had been to explain it away. I trusted Claire. Because I trusted her, I automatically searched for innocent explanations. That habit disappeared overnight. Not because I had proof of anything. Because I realized I had been acting like both her husband and her defense attorney. Every inconsistency received a justification. Every unanswered question received an excuse. Every uncomfortable feeling was pushed aside before I examined it. Now I stopped doing that. I wasn't looking for evidence of betrayal. I wasn't trying to catch her. I simply stopped protecting her from my own observations. That distinction mattered. The moment I arrived home, I noticed details I would have ignored before. Claire checked her phone 3 times during dinner. She smiled at one message and immediately turned the screen downward. Later, while we watched television, she responded to several notifications without saying who was texting. None of those actions proved anything. People use their phones. People receive messages. People smile. But I no longer rushed to explain everything. For the first time, I allowed events to exist without forcing them into a comforting narrative. That evening, after Claire fell asleep, I sat alone in the dark living room. I wasn't angry. I wasn't devastated. Not yet. What I felt was something quieter. A growing determination to stop guessing, to stop assuming, and to start paying attention. Over the next several weeks, I treated the situation the way I would approach a complicated project at work. I stopped chasing conclusions and focused on facts. Every evening, after Claire went to bed, I spent an hour reviewing her Instagram account. The more I looked, the clearer the pattern became. Derek wasn't a random follower. He was Claire's former boyfriend. I discovered that through old photographs buried deep in the account's history. Their interactions stretched back years, long before the profile had become popular. At first, they communicated carefully. Comments, inside jokes, references that meant nothing to outsiders. Then the exchanges became more personal. I started building a timeline. Not because I wanted to, because I couldn't stop noticing connections. One weekend, I found photographs from a resort in Arizona that Claire claimed was hosting a marketing seminar. 3 posts later, Derek uploaded pictures from the exact same resort. Different angles. Same date. Same location. A month later, the same thing happened in Chicago. Then Nashville. Then San Diego. Individually, each coincidence seemed harmless. Together, they formed a pattern that became impossible to ignore. I created a spreadsheet. Dates. Locations. Business trips. Instagram posts. Derek's activity. The results surprised even me. Every time Derek became unusually active on Claire's account, another conference seemed to appear on her calendar. Sometimes within days. Sometimes within hours. What disturbed me most wasn't the possibility of an affair. It was the consistency. This wasn't impulsive behavior. It wasn't a mistake. Whatever was happening had been integrated into her life with remarkable precision. Meanwhile, Claire continued behaving normally. Family dinners, school events, weekend errands. She moved through our home exactly as she always had. And every day, the contrast became harder to process. Because the woman sitting across from me at breakfast seemed completely different from the woman I was discovering online. One version was familiar. The other had existed for years without my knowledge. And for the first time, I began wondering how many people already knew. The answer arrived sooner than I expected. One evening, while reviewing older posts, I noticed Claire thanking a regional clothing company for a sponsorship. At first, it seemed insignificant. Then I saw another sponsored post. And another. And another. I clicked through the tags and started following the trail. What I discovered changed the entire situation. Claire wasn't simply running a hidden Instagram account. She had built a business around it. There were partnerships with travel companies, local restaurants, clothing brands, beauty products, and marketing agencies. Some posts openly disclosed paid promotions. Others linked to affiliate programs and discount codes. The account wasn't a hobby. It was generating income. Income she had never mentioned. I spent several evenings researching influencer marketing and sponsorship rates. With 300,000 followers, even conservative estimates suggested she was earning far more than I would have guessed. Yet none of that money had ever appeared in conversations about her finances. The secrecy itself became another question. Then things became even more uncomfortable. While scrolling through comments, I recognized names. People I knew. A former client from my company. A business owner I had worked with years earlier. Several mutual friends. People who interacted with Claire's content regularly. People who clearly knew the account existed. One friend had commented for nearly 4 years. Another had attended events with her. Neither had ever mentioned it to me. The realization hit harder than I expected. This wasn't a private secret between husband and wife. An entire social circle had been quietly operating around information I didn't possess. Whether they knew about Derek or not, I couldn't say. But they certainly knew about the account. And somehow everyone had assumed I knew too. The deeper I looked, the larger the gap became between my understanding of our life and reality. What started as a strange Instagram discovery was no longer confined to my marriage. It touched friendships, business relationships, professional reputations, and every new detail forced me to ask the same question. How many people had been looking at this hidden version of Claire while standing in my living room pretending nothing was unusual? Almost a month passed before I said anything. Not because I was afraid, because I wanted to understand the situation before I stepped into it. During those weeks, Claire never suspected a thing. She continued traveling, continued posting, continued living 2 versions of her life simultaneously. Then one Tuesday evening, she walked into the kitchen carrying her laptop and a cup of tea. I was sitting at the table reviewing invoices when she casually mentioned it. "I'll be in Nashville next week." I looked up. "Nashville? Marketing conference," she said. 3 days. The answer arrived too quickly, too rehearsed. She had used almost the exact same wording before. For years, I probably wouldn't have noticed. This time I did. I nodded slowly. "What conference?" She paused. Only for a second. But after weeks of observation, I had learned to recognize hesitation. The Regional Branding Summit. I folded the invoice and set it aside. Then I asked the question, calmly, without emotion, "Will Derek be there?" Everything stopped. The silence was immediate. Claire froze. Not dramatically. Not like someone caught in a movie. More like a person whose mind suddenly lost track of the script. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. The refrigerator hummed quietly in the background. A dog barked somewhere outside. Claire stared at me. I simply waited. Years earlier, I would have rushed to fill the silence. I would have explained the question, softened it, given her room to escape. This time, I did nothing. Eventually, she set the tea down. "Why are you asking that?" I noticed she hadn't answered. "Because I've seen the account." Her expression changed instantly. Not guilt. Recognition. The understanding that a locked door had finally opened. "What account?" I held her gaze. "Your Instagram account." Another silence. Longer this time. The kind that reveals more than words ever could. For the first time in 17 years, I wasn't arguing, wasn't accusing, wasn't demanding. I was simply sitting across from my wife, waiting to hear what she would say next. And judging by her face, she understood that everything had changed. The conversation ended without the explosion I once would have expected. Claire denied very little, but she explained a lot. Over the following days, she tried to reframe the story. The account had started as a hobby. The sponsorships happened unexpectedly. Derek was an old friend. The trips were professional opportunities. The lies were omissions, not deceptions. Each explanation sounded carefully constructed, reasonable when viewed alone, less convincing when placed beside everything I had already discovered. The Nashville conference became the first crack. The morning after our conversation, I searched for the event she mentioned. It didn't exist. Not under that name. Not under any variation of it. No venue. No registration page. No industry announcements. Nothing. When I calmly asked her about it later, she claimed the organizers had changed plans. Then she said it was invitation only. Then she said she might not attend after all. The explanation changed every time the question returned. Meanwhile, new information continued surfacing. People began reaching out after learning I knew about the account. Not dramatic revelations. Small details. Comments. Observations. Conversations they suddenly remembered. One acquaintance casually mentioned seeing Claire with Derek years earlier at a hotel restaurant during a supposed business trip. Another remembered a weekend event where Claire introduced Derek as a consultant she worked with frequently. Then came something I hadn't expected. Derek wasn't the only recurring name. As I reviewed older posts and messages, I noticed several other men appearing repeatedly throughout different periods of the account's history. Different cities, different years, different patterns. Maybe innocent, maybe not. But each discovery raised new questions. Questions Claire struggled to answer consistently. That became the real problem. Not a single piece of evidence. Not Derek. Not the hidden account. The growing number of explanations required to hold everything together. Every answer created two new questions. Every clarification revealed another inconsistency. And slowly, the story she had spent years managing became harder for her to control. Because once enough pieces stop fitting, people stop debating what happened. They start wondering what else they're missing. At some point, I stopped searching for a final explanation. The shift happened gradually. For weeks, I had been collecting information, comparing timelines, reviewing old memories, and trying to understand exactly where the truth ended and the fiction began. Then one evening, sitting alone in my office, I looked at the spreadsheet I had spent countless hours building. Trips, dates, comments, messages, names, patterns, questions. There was enough information to keep digging for months, maybe years. But for the first time, I realized none of it would change the outcome. Whether there had been one secret relationship or several. Whether the lies started 5 years ago or 15. Whether certain people knew more than they admitted. The result remained the same. The person I believed I knew no longer existed in the way I had imagined. That realization hurt more than anything connected to Derek. More than the hidden account. More than the money. More than the deception. I had spent 17 years sharing a home with someone whose inner life remained largely invisible to me. Not because I wasn't paying attention, because she had carefully controlled what I was allowed to see. Claire continued offering explanations. Sometimes apologetic. Sometimes defensive. Sometimes emotional. But eventually I noticed something important. Every conversation focused on individual details. Specific trips. Specific posts. Specific decisions. Meanwhile, the larger truth remained untouched. Trust had been replaced by uncertainty. And once that happened, no explanation could restore what had already disappeared. The separation that followed wasn't dramatic. There were meetings, documents, difficult conversations with our children, practical decisions that had to be made. Life became smaller and more procedural for a while. When everything finally settled, people expected me to feel victorious. Others expected me to feel defeated. I felt neither. What I felt was clarity. For the first time in months, there was no mystery left to solve. No hidden account to investigate. No story to decode. Just reality. And strange as it sounds, reality was easier to live with than doubt had ever been. A year later, I found an old family photograph while cleaning out a storage box. The picture had been taken during a summer vacation years earlier. Claire was smiling. The kids were younger. I was standing beside them with my arm around her shoulders. For a moment, I simply looked at it. Not with anger. Not with regret. Just curiosity. There had been a time when that photograph would have ruined my entire day. I would have stared at it searching for signs, wondering what was real, questioning every memory attached to it. But that impulse was gone. The answers I once chased so desperately no longer mattered. Not because I had discovered everything. Because I had finally accepted that I never would. Some truths arrive completely. Others remain unfinished forever. Either way, life keeps moving. I placed the photograph back into the box and closed the lid. Then I returned to what I had been doing. No bitterness. No dramatic realization. Just another ordinary afternoon. Looking back, I think that's how most stories actually end. Not when every question is answered. Not when justice feels complete. They end quietly. The moment you realize you no longer need the answers to keep moving forward.
That's the end of the story. If you made it all the way here, consider subscribing to stay with us. I've placed a couple of recommended videos for you, so pick one and keep watching. I'll see you in the next story.